how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. Sorry for the sweaty exterior here. It's still 95 degrees Fahrenheit or about 36 degrees Celsius in Osaka right now in the middle of September. What the hell is going on? Really hot. So if I look all sweaty, sorry. I just came in from being outside from the gym and walking to my place. So pardon the sweat. Anyway, I just want to do a quick little video, a little book review update for Cimmerian September, Michael Kaluta's great event celebrating the works of the late and very great Robert E. Howard. And really, this year shouldn't be called Cimmerian September. It should be called Borak September, because many of my fellow booktubers, Michael Kaluta himself has been talking a lot about Borak. Here's the nice Del Rey edition. Others such as Jim at Mystery and Mayhem, Tim at Secret Fire Books, and I'm sure soon Ben Grammaticus Books will be talking about Borak. I'm sure there's some others that I'm missing. Apologies for that. And I have also been reading lots of Borak. And I just completed this, The Lost Valley of Iskander, in the Zebra Books edition from 1974. This has a cool wraparound Jeff Jones cover that I showed off in the past in my Robert E. Howard bookshelf tour video. And again, speaking of Grammaticus, Ben at Grammaticus a couple months back, I believe, did a really excellent look through of this book and talked about it in detail. And I will link his excellent video below. Please go check that out. And Jim at Mystery and Mayhem also talked about the first novella in this, The Daughter of Erlik Khan. And I will talk about all three of these stories just very briefly because I don't want to repeat what others have said. Just give my take on them. As Michael Kaluta said in his most recent video about Borak, Borak is an awesome character, or as Michael says, a fantastic character. Yes, he is. In fact, he's probably tied with Solomon Kane for my favorite Robert E. Howard character. I know fans of Conan are going, sacrilege, how dare you? And I do like Conan. I like a lot of other Robert E. Howard characters. He wrote several, a dozen at least, very interesting, cool, regular characters that he wrote stories about. But there's something about Francis Xavier Gordon, known as Borak. He's just a super tough, super competent, incredibly high levels of endurance. From his Texas background, we're not given a lot of background about Gordon. It's kind of doled out here and there, piecemeal, little pieces here and little bits there in the stories that he was grew up in marauding tribes of Native Americans, of Indians. He probably did some Indian fighting or lived with Indians and learned some of their stealthy techniques, because Borak can just kind of appear and disappear like a ninja quite often. And also that's where he got his quick draw and super accurate marksmanship with a pistol or a rifle. He got those from his Texas upbringing. For whatever reason, or never really told a reason as far as I've been able to discover so far from what I've read. And I've only read 4 out of, I believe, 6 or 7 Borak stories. A couple of them that were not published in Howard's lifetime, of course. Robert E. Howard passing away at a tender age of 30. And, before he saw some of these stories published. Only, I believe, according to the introduction of this book anyway, only 3 were published in his lifetime. So 3, possibly 4. They mentioned 3 here. 2 of the stories in this book were published when he was still alive, in the last years of his life, between 1934 and 1936. The Daughter of Erlik Khan, the first novella in this book, was published in the Top Notch magazine in the December 1934 issue. And the last story in this book, Hawk of the Hills, the last novella, was published in June 1935 issue of Top Notch magazine. The Lost Valley of Iskander, the title for which this volume takes its title, this was never published in Howard's lifetime. In fact, in this book, the Zebra Books edition from 1974, published under the editorship of Glenn Lord, who was the executor of Robert E. Howard's estate at that point. This was the first appearance of that story in print. A little bit more about Francis Xavier Gordon, El Borak. So, as I mentioned before, he grew up in Texas, we're told, and he, arrived in the Middle East. So we have an interesting introduction from Daryl C. Richardson, who talks about these stories, and he mentions talking about El Borak's character. A quote from, I believe this is from Hawk of the Hills. Francis Xavier Gordon was known by repute from Stamboul to the China Sea. The Mohammedans called him El Borak the Swift, and they feared and respected him. Years spent in the Orient had given him the ability to pass himself for a native anywhere. Now, most of these stories are set in Afghanistan, and though Robert E. Howard, of course, being from Texas, Cross Plains, Texas, never set foot in Afghanistan or any of these surrounding areas that he writes about, he must have done a lot of research, because the verisimilitude, the authenticity of the feeling of these books, I'm sure there's plenty of cultural mistakes being made, but they feel authentic. They seem authentic, like he knows the peoples, he knows their different kind of tribal breakdowns, and how they despise this tribe over another tribe, and where they live and how they live. And so he must have done some research, because it definitely feels authentic. Now, I've never been to Afghanistan either, so I'm sure there are some a local person would definitely find some fault with these stories, which are set around the early teens in the 19th century, 1912, 1915. We're not given any exact dates, but somewhere, 20 years before Robert E. Howard was writing about them. Sometimes he's referred to as a soldier of fortune, but he doesn't really seem to care about money. What he cares about is helping people, his friendship, his allies, and if someone betrays him or his close friends or allies, he will take decisive and grim action for retribution, as happens in a couple of these stories. Or he's trying to protect interests in that area, making sure that the area stays as safe as possible, and comes to the aid of sometimes people who are in need. And he doesn't really seem to give a hoot about gold or any other money matters. He is content to be wandering around in the wilderness, rough-hewn, and living free and dangerous existence, exhilaration from the pursuit of dangerous exploits. And he's a really cool character. And he's not a giant like Conan. He's not dour like Solomon Kane, but he's his own character, and he's a very cool character. Now, let me talk a little bit about this book and the stories therein. This has, again, that Jeff Jones cover art I mentioned, and it also has some very cool interior artwork done by Michael Kaluta. Now, I believe Bennett Grammaticus Books did, in his video about this book, showed a lot of this great art. Here's a list of illustrations and the page numbers throughout the book. But there's all sorts of little pieces. I don't know if this is supposed to be Gordon here. I don't picture him with the beard. And then we have this great, beautiful piece of artwork and the kind of more further illustration showing the start of the first novella, which maybe is a little hard to read here, The Daughter of Erlik Khan. Now, Erlik Khan is a giant, big mountain peak. A lot of these stories, kind of interesting thematically, I suppose, in a certain geographical way, is that all of these stories are set in gorges and mountains of Afghanistan, and involve Gordon in being pursued or besieged by his enemies. The situation here is, again, Howard is at the peak of his writing powers at this time of his life. He's 28, 29, 30. He came up with the character of Borak when he was a younger man, but most of the stories he wrote, and towards the end of his life, when his writing powers of description and describing action, and these books have some of the best action you'd ever read, period, from a pulp writer, let alone of Howard's writing. And Howard is just gets the ball rolling in these stories right off the bat. So this one, we come in as Gordon, Francis Xavier Gordon, is assisting a couple of Englishmen. So we have Pembroke and Ormond. Ormond and Pembroke ostensibly have hired Gordon to help them, guide them to, within the lands near anyway, Erlik Khan. And they want to help rescue their friend. But actually what they want to do is they have some token, which will show will get them through these hostile tribesmen into this city, the city near Erlik Khan, and they're going to, with the assistance of one of the priests there, and it's a Satan worshipping cult or a demon worshipping cult in this city in the mountains. So in this city, this mountainous city, Yolgan, before, several months or years before, Gordon had helped a woman who is fleeing from her husband who wishes to kill her, an Indian woman, Yasmina, got her to safety in the city, but she's since been accepted as like a deity, the daughter of Erlik Khan, and so she's treated, very well, but she's not really wanting to stay there anymore. Borak doesn't know this at the time, though, but what Ormond and Pembroke, these two English provocateurs or rogues, I guess, are wanting to kidnap her and take her back to give, for money, to give her to her irate husband who wants to torture her to death in revenge. And they have used Gordon to get them as close to their destination as they needed to be, to get them there safely, because he knows the land better than anyone else. They foolishly kill his servant, and they think they've killed him and left him, basically abandoned him without a horse or without food or anything. They've moved camp and left him while he was out hunting, and they, assuming they left him to die out in the wilderness. But little do they know Borak. Borak is very resourceful, and his grim determination to exact revenge for the death of his friend, as well as being betrayed himself, burns strongly in him, and he sets off to get retribution. He basically challenges an old enemy leader of this kind of nomadic Turkoman tribe and kills that man in a fair fight, and just nonchalantly starts to take over command of this group of bandits and takes them, hides them in a valley near the city of Yolgan. Wait for me here. They know they're close to being discovered and may die or whatever, and he's kind of lured them with promises of riches. And he knows there are riches somewhere in Yolgan, but how he's going to fulfill his promise, he's going to worry about later. Gordon's a real laser-focused guy. He knows, what is my task? What do I have to do to get from A to B? He's going to do it. And so he enters the city, and now Francis Gordon is a guy that, like Richard Burton, frankly. I'm sure, Lawrence of Arabia was, T.E. Lawrence was an inspiration for Howard, but so probably was Richard Burton. So Richard Burton, who, not the film actor, but the British explorer who would, disguise himself as a native of the area and, infiltrate and to check out just because he was curious and wanted to learn. So Gordon is a lot like that. He can pass for a native. He speaks many different languages and dialects, and he sneaks into this city, and he knows where Yasmina's chambers are, and he goes and knocks on the door and is greeted by Yasmina, and she tells them, he just wants to check in on her, really. He's not really knowing anything about what's going on with her or why. He hasn't yet found out why Ormond and Pembroke have betrayed him and killed his servant. He doesn't know their plans for Yasmina. And she tells him she's bored, she wants out of there, and Gordon promises to give her a safe escort, but first he's got to exact his revenge. So what follows is a frenzied, pursuit, capture. Yasmina is captured by Ormond and Pembroke, and, basically Gordon has to escape the vengeful monks of Yolgan. He has to, confront Pembroke and especially Ormond and get revenge for betrayal and the death of his friend. And he has to get Yasmina and his new bandit compatriots or men somehow to safety, if at all possible. He has many things he has to do. And one of the very fun things in this story is, Gordon's just a machine. He's just a fighting machine. He goes, almost never seems to tire. But in this one, he is so tired because he's been through such an ordeal that, at the very end, he's climbing up cliffs and having battles, and his legs are shaking from the tension and the tiredness. He's almost falling asleep, and he's getting woozy from exhaustion, and he still manages to come through. He's just a machine, a wolf. He just will, when he gets close to Ormond for his revenge, he just comes to life again and sees red and attacks. He's quite a tactician, though. He's very smart and resourceful. He doesn't just blunder in like a, frenzied, kind of berserker. And then each of these novellas has little chapters. We have a nice little chapter break up and some cool little art all through the book, right? Yasmina and her handmaidens, again, about the only women you're going to see in this story. And again, some very cool pencil drawings, inked illustrations. Anyway, very cool story. Now, I read The Three-Bladed Doom, the only Borak novel, one of the few novels that Robert E. Howard wrote on the channel here in my April reading wrap-up. That was a fantastic novel, which Tim at Secret Fire Books just also reviewed and talked about recently and did an excellent job of describing its various merits. It's a fantastic book. I don't know if these three novellas, or the middle one maybe is more of a novelette, I don't know if they quite reach that height, but they're awfully close. So that's 4 out of 4 for me so far of the Borak stories. They're all hitting pretty hard. Old cigarette ad, typical from a vintage paperback from the 70s. The Lost Valley of Iskander is the never before published story. It's actually a kind of a novelette length, about 40-some pages, 45 pages maybe, that was first published in this volume, this Zebra Books edition. And this one, again, most of Borak stories are just straight up adventures. There's no monsters, there's no demons. There's a kind of monster, kind of type, kind of, I don't want to give it away, but in Three-Bladed Doom, there's a kind of beast creature that Borak fights man against beast in that one. Fantastic scene in that fantastic chapter in that book, of one of many. But the only other one that has even a remote kind of fantastical edge is this one, Lost Valley of Iskander, because it's a lost race story, basically. And this one, because there's less space to play with, it's in the novelette and not a novella, it's just right on it. So in this one, Gordon's on the run, being pursued by a Hungarian baddie named Hunyadi, who has plans to take over the region. And in Borak's possession are some papers that would prove his foul, evil plan that he could take to authorities and have them handle the situation. But Gordon has to get there first. And he's traversing these gorges and mountains, and he's being, tracked and attacked all over the place, and he's trying to get his way through, and he eventually comes across a young man who's pinned under a rock. Now, this young man is from Iskander, the Lost Valley of Iskander, and he's tall and blonde and fair, and Gordon rescues him. There's a huge rock pinned on him, and the young man thinks, there's no way you can lift this dude. And of course, Borak, all coiled spring muscles. He's not massive, just very, very strong, and he manages to lift the rock and free this young man. This young man's called Bartolus, and from then on he says, my life is yours, and Gordon. And so he says Gordon's like, I'm being pursued. They're starting to be shot at, after he's rescued Bartolus. And Bartolus says, come with me. I can take you to our valley where none of these foul Turks can get in. And they have to traverse this really treacherous kind of ladder carved out of rock to get down to this escape route. And Bartolus is really impressed by Gordon that he can even do it, and brings him back to his little city, the Lost Valley of Iskander. And Gordon realizes that Bartolus's people are the remnants of Hannibal's troops that came with him as he was crossing over the mountains. And this group, for whatever reason, was told to stay and guard this place and keep this as a backup. And of course, Hannibal never came back to that area, and these people just stayed and lived there forever. So they're Greek descendants living in this remote valley. And basically, Gordon's still has his work cut out for him. Suffice it to say, nonstop action and excitement as Gordon El Borak has to help the people of Iskander fight against his enemies who are trying to invade. And it's exciting stuff. Very cool. So this one even has chapter names. The oiled silk package, which is what El Borak is carrying with the special, missive there. And there's Atalis. So Atalis is the kind of the city or fortification in this valley where these people these descendants of Greeks have lived for centuries. And then we have the sons of Iskander. Don't know why I keep wanting to say Iskandar because of my years of watching Star Blazers, Yamato, the Japanese animation, and the duel with Ptolemy the King. And here we have the jackal that's the traitor who's trying to betray and get El Borak killed. The death of Hyanyadi. Of course, it does not pay to be an enemy of El Borak. He's going to take you out one way or the other. That's a very cool story. Got some lovely art there inside. Then when it comes to Hawk of the Hills. Now, Hawk of the Hills is the story that was published in Top Notch magazine in June 1935. And this one is, again, more of a novella length. And this one's interesting. It kind of shares, El Borak shares the main character duties with a British agent called Willoughby. Now, how this starts off with, again, Gordon is in some dire straits, trying to escape some enemies. He had been attending a sit-down with some of his friends with a rival, Afdel Khan, and his men. And Afdel Khan used this time when everyone was sitting peacefully around some food, around the campfire, to suddenly attack and kill all these other men because he wants to gain control of the trade routes in this area. And he tries to kill El Borak as well, but Gordon escapes and rounds up a bunch of his men, and just goes on a siege of an all-out war, basically, with this Afdal Khan, evil tyrant. And Willoughby has been dispatched to try to settle their affairs, and he thinks that he can finagle Gordon into not killing Afdal Khan and forgetting the blood feud, and get some kind of peace pact done. But it turns out Afdal Khan doesn't want to. He's using Willoughby to get close to El Borak and take him out. He wants to be able to charge huge taxes or huge levies to the various traders coming through, and basically a power broker in the area. And he took out these friends of El Borak because they might be opposed to him. He wanted to clear the way for his avarice. So Afdal Khan, his people are the Orakzai. Afdal Khan's brother, Babar Ali, is a cruel, sadistic SOB, and he's the main antagonist in the earlier part of the story. He was conducting Willoughby to have a parley with Gordon, and if Willoughby failed, which it seems like he does, then Babar Ali doesn't mind just abandoning him to his death. And then Borak rescues him just in time and brings him back to his mountain stronghold that used to be a fortification that belonged to, or that was ruled by Afdal Khan, but now Borak, as we're told, took that city by himself in a very clever way, and now his men are also hiding out there. And very pleasant surprise for me is this story, towards the end of the story, we see the reintroduction of a character called Yar Ali Khan, who's just a really fun sidekick character to Borak, to Gordon. He didn't appear in the first two stories in here, but he is main sidekick character in The Three-Bladed Doom, and he's a lot of fun. Just really well written and a cool character. Big Afrit who, loves Borak and, basically worships the ground he walks on and will follow him anywhere, and has got a heart of the lion and is jealous of his attention, and is this really funny character. He's a real treat, and he pops up in this one and doesn't disappoint. He's a lot of fun in this one as well. And basically, once again, Gordon's going to get his vengeance, and he's going to show Willoughby a few tricks of how Willoughby thought he'd use Gordon to affect the ends that help the British Empire, but instead it's the other way around. Gordon has his plan. He, protects Willoughby, saves him, and takes care of his problem all in one fell swoop. Again, lots of back and forth action, excitement, nonstop fun. Let's take a quick look at some of the pictures in this one. And we have interior art for all of the chapters. I just love it when books have these art. Here's the cool painting, cool drawing of the fortress, the mounted fortress where Gordon and his men are holding up, and it's very hard to, almost impossible to. It's impregnable basically to the enemies. And here's Yar Ali Khan throwing a fit when he thinks these other dogs and jackals, have left Borak behind to a dangerous position, but of course they were just following his orders. This was a kick in the pants read if you like action and adventure. Pulp writing at its finest. You can't go wrong with the Lost Valley of Iskander or any of the Borak stories, frankly. And again, I won't show all the art since I'm running long already, all the art that accompanies these stories here. But for example, we have some cool art for the Daughter of Erlik Khan in this Del Rey edition, right? Gordon falling down the slope there. How's that for a cool picture of Borak? Again, close cropped hair. I can imagine, if they made a movie of this, they'd get it looks kind of like Christopher Lambert or, Thomas Jane, really. Now, in this volume, The Lost Valley of Iskander is the first story, but it's published under the name Sword of the Hills, which was its original title. Swords of the Hills. So the order is a little different in this book than it is in this one. And this is probably publication order, I would guess. Or maybe they're trying to piece together some kind of chronology of the stories. This book, of course, doesn't only have Borak stories. It also has Kirby O'Donnell stories because there unfortunately weren't as many Borak stories as we might like. There appears to be 7 Borak stories. We have, of course, Swords of the Hills, which is the Lost Valley of Iskander, and Daughter of Erlik Khan, and Hawk of the Hills, Three-Bladed Doom, and then the 3 that I haven't read yet, Blood of the Gods, Sons of the Hawk, and Son of the White Wolf. which were also published in another edition, I believe, called Sons of the White Wolf, which I don't have. I wish I did, because it's a lot of fun to read them in this older paperback edition, mass market paperback. But if you want to get your hands on all of the Borak stories, the Del Rey edition is definitely the way to go. So anyway, what's my rating? About as high as it can possibly get. I don't usually rate books, but if I was going to give this one star rating out of 5 stars, it would be an easy 5. These stories are great. Full of adventure, full of local color, full of daring do and close escapes and violence. It's quite violent and bloody. Quite often skulls are cleft and, throats are cut and, heads are cut off, etc. So there's lots of that kind of thing, very bloody and savage elements, but lots of some humor occasionally there, but they're pretty straightforward adventure tales. If you like that kind of thing, you will not go wrong reading the Francis Xavier Gordon Borak stories by Robert E. Howard. So that wraps it up for this overlong book report, book review. I hope you found something interesting in there, and I will look forward to seeing you in my next video.